in 2 Samuel chapter 23, verses 8 through the end, through 39. All right. These be the names of the mighty men whom David had. And I thought this is going to be a lot of fun to tell you all these names.
You can kind of just skip over them. We can read them.
They always end up being the neatest, don't they? Sometimes.
The Tachmonite that sat in the seat, chief among the captains, the same was Adino the Eznite. He lifted up his spear against 800 whom he slew at one time. Now, 1 Chronicles 11 has a list also. It's very similar, but there are differences. And in 1 Chronicles, this man is talked about as slaying 300 at once. So it is common, I think, in the Old Testament, in describing anything that has to do with numbers, to have a discrepancy sometimes because of the way, everything was, they didn't have copiers, except for men copied. And so men are fallible. So whether it's 800 or 300, for one man, they make movies sell when the main hero kills 10, it's never 300 or 800. So, and some commentaries were trying to say that it's probably him and the man under him. Well, maybe it doesn't say that though. I kind of like to just look at what it says, and what would give this man this much power? Who would give this man this?
That's be God.
Yes.
In my translation, it says he once used his spear to kill 800 enemies. So that translation says he did it, not
right. It doesn't say. Yeah. I think if it was him and his man, it would have said that, and it still would have been a mighty feat.
Yeah.
Or depending on how many men he had, and they didn't have guns that went, like we have today. So it's just, God dealt with this man and gave him power. And, we don't, how many times did God probably come in for people, use people, pour his spirit on people, and people do mighty things that we don't know about? That, because, that one scripture is talking about Jesus, but it says if all the things he did could be written down, the books couldn't contain it. I think that's probably the same thing with God in the Old Testament.
He wants to do it.
I think he does. And you know what? We don't have physical warfare like these men did. But it definitely is written for our example so that we do have spiritual warfare. We absolutely do. And can we be victorious over the spiritual warfare in our lives, in the lives of our church family, each other? Yeah, we can kill 800. So let's do it. So let me see.
It says 1 can chase 1,000.
Yes.
2 can chase 10,000.
Yes. And it doesn't say 2 can chase 2,000. 2 chases 10,000. So 2 is better than 1.
Multiplies.
Yeah. So this man came to David at Ziklag. It calls him Jashobeam. Not sure how to say that, but anyway. And we find that in 1 Chronicles 12:1 and 6, and then 1 Chronicles 27:2. He afterwards became the general of the 1st Division of the army, and then he was followed by this next man that it talks about. With some of these men, there is more scripture that describes them, but then with some of them, this is the only place they're mentioned. So it just is interesting to me. I didn't want to spend too much time here, but it's interesting just to see a little bit of what they did. Verse 9, after him was Eliezer the son of Dodo, the Ahohite, one of the three mighty men with David, when they defied the Philistines that were gathered together to battle, and the men of Israel were gone away. He arose and smote the Philistines until his hand was weary, and his hand clave to the sword. And the Lord wrought a great victory that day, and the people returned after him only to spoil. So God used him to change the tide of an entire battle. And it's just amazing to me to remember that they were doing this with spears and clubs and, not the kind of warfare we have today. Okay. Ahohite, it calls him an Ahohite, is derived from Ahoah, the son of Bela, Benjamin's son. And sometimes it makes you think that maybe they're foreigners, at least it would make me think. But most of the time, it's just they are called by their tribe or a family clan name. And the people there, Israel wasn't that huge of a country yet. And these would, if they say Ahohite, it would mean something to the people at that. They would know where they came from. They'd know more about them. And after him, verse 11, was Shema, the son of Agi the Hararite. And the Philistines were gathered together into a troop, where was a piece of ground full of lentils. And the people fled from the Philistines. But he stood in the midst of the ground and defended it, and slew the Philistines. And the Lord wrought a great victory. First we can picture the battle where the Philistines proved to be a little bit too much for the children. I mean, the army fled. Well, God uses this one person, Shema, to stand up against them, and he brings victory. So really, all God needs is one person to stand up. Go ahead.
But he stood here, but then on verse 10 it says, and his hand cleaved into the sword. I have that underlined too, and the Lord brought victory. So if we cleave to our sword.
That's a great thought. I love that.
The Lord brings victory. So we cleave and we stand, and the Lord brings victory.
Amen. I like that. I like that. I need a pencil.
must have heard that somewhere in the lesson because I have it underlined. So.
Oh, that's great, because the sword is the word of God.
Yeah.
Yes, so we stand.
We cleave to our sword.
Yes, yes. Throw me a pencil, Alice. I'm going to write that down. Okay.
I think that God, I don't know about the people knowing the Lord or not, but think of the wars that our country has fought. The First World War, the Second World War, in particular those you hear about people, men, Medal of Honor winners, that just had
Made a
this
difference.
uncommon courage.
Yes.
And did, 18-year-old boys, and just stood in the face of battle and just,
Yes.
that I think whether they knew the Lord or not, that was God instilled, using them for that particular purpose, for that time,
Yes.
fighting for us, for freedom, for whatever.
Yes.
And so how much more did he do it for his own people,
Right.
somebody that was asking for it or
Right.
needed it.
Yes. Okay. Then verse 13. And 3 of the 30 went down and came to David in the harvest time unto the cave of Adullam. So we have had 3 men described to us, and it really is unclear. And I tried to find clarity here. It's unclear whether it's the first 3 that we just mentioned who did this, or the next 3, because there's several different groups of 3. So I just don't know. But the main thing is what happened here. So the 3 of the 30 came to David in the harvest time unto the cave of Adullam, and the troop of Philistines pitched in the valley of Rephaim. So they're at war with the Philistines. There's a battle. And David was then in an hold, and the garrison of the Philistines was then in Bethlehem. So if they're in Bethlehem, then they're pretty close. And that's Israel's territory at the time, not the Philistines. So David longed and said, "Oh, that one would give me drink of the water of the well of Bethlehem, which is by the gate." So how do you think he knew that? If we remember, David was born and raised in Bethlehem. That was his territory, his home ground. And he probably had been at this well many, many times. And so when they were fighting the Philistines, he's just thinking, oh, I wish I could have water from that well. Now, some commentaries say that if you are in control of the well, whichever army was in control of the well of a particular town, city, whatever, they controlled the city. They had taken the city. So they were saying that in saying this, David was wishing that, well, I'm sure he was wishing anyway, that they were in control. But almost going as far as to say, as the three men that went down, they took the well, so from the Philistines, so in order to draw the water. We aren't told that, so again, I don't know. But I do know that for three men to do this was an amazing feat. In verse 16, and the three mighty men brake through the host of the Philistines and drew water out of the well of Bethlehem that was by the gate, and took it and brought it to David. So first of all, I'm going to stop here for a second. What do you think would make them willing to risk their lives, three men, against the whole army, if it seems like they were not found out, were not caught. But they risked that, and if they were caught, they would be killed. So what do you think made them willing to do this?
Love for David.
Yes. Love for David. And, I believe that David had this kind of effect on his men. He was that kind of leader that inspired the love of his men. And so that's a great and wonderful thing, but David is typical of Jesus. And so those that love Jesus will do anything for him. And so in Acts 20:24, the Apostle Paul says, none of these things move me. And he's talking about hardship, trouble that was coming his way. Neither count I my life dear unto myself. The life of Jesus that Paul was following meant more to him than his own life. And I think that's the same way these men felt. They loved David enough to give their lives. And in Romans 5:7 it says, for one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would even dare to die. Well, it also says, a man will lay down his, no better love than this, that a man will lay down his life for his friends. And so this is what we have here. But it is a picture, the entire army didn't go down there. It was just three that loved him in this way. And I'm not saying that there weren't others maybe in his army that did, but I think it's a picture to us that out of the entire people of God, it's only a few that love him this much.
It's kind of like the three disciples that were closest.
Yes, yes, it is. Yes, out of the 12.
The three Hebrew children, only three of them stood up to Nebuchadnezzar and
That's true.
And the statue and were thrown in. The rest of them bowed down. Assumed.
Right. Right.
Anyways.
Love is so powerful.
Yes, love is so powerful,
Love
she
is so
said.
powerful. That's what they do.
You know,
Go
what you
ahead.
were saying before about taking the well or whatever. But that's not what it says.
Right, it's not.
I mean, they actually brought him water and.
Right. And so the only reason I mention that is if you come across it, so that you realize that some people think that. But look what he did in the last part of verse 16. They brought it to David. Nevertheless, he would not drink thereof, but poured it out unto the Lord. And I remember as a kid reading this and thinking, they risked their lives and he just poured it out.
I thought the same thing, and I wasn't a kid.
But, they knew what this act meant. And in verse 17, he said, be it far from me, O Lord, that I should do this. Is not this the blood of the men that went in jeopardy of their lives? Therefore he would not drink it. These things did these three mighty men. And the word mighty means champion, chief, valiant, powerful. They had a drink offering in the Old Testament. And I tried to find out a little bit more about it. Maybe Alice knows more. But it was offered along with the 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 bloody sacrifices. Not that, I'm saying as opposed to the waves of grain that they would offer and all this other stuff, but that when they slew an animal, a drink offering was also offered. And so David, that was what he was doing. Their sacrifice for him, he transferred to God and poured it out. It was as if he was pouring out their blood.
And those three knew what that meant.
Yes, they did. They knew what it meant, and so I don't think they were offended that he did that. They were probably honored and blessed that he did that. He could not. He saw it as their blood, and he wasn't just going to drink. It wasn't a small thing in his eyes. It was a huge thing, and as such, it was a great honor to them. It rewarded them in a way that drinking it probably couldn't have. I have, it's called McLaren's Expositions. It's just a commentary, but I liked what he said, so I'm just going to read a little bit. Jesus has broken through the ranks of our enemies to bring us the water of which if a man drink, he shall live forever. If we would see the highest example of self-sacrificing love, we must turn to look not on the instance of it that shine through the pages of history, but on the Christ hanging on the cross, because he loved those who did not love him and gave his life a ransom for sinners. David's men did it because they loved him, because they had a relationship of love with him. Jesus did it for people who hated him. David would not drink because the cup seemed to him to be red with blood. Jesus offers to us a cup, not of cold water only, but of water and blood, and bids us drink of it and remember him. David's impulse was to offer to God what was too precious for his own use. That is the fitting destination of our most precious and prized possessions, and whatever is thus offered becomes more precious by being offered. The altar sanctifies and enhances the worth of the gift. When we give ourselves to Jesus, he renders us back to ourselves, far better worth having than before. And the same thing is true as to all of our riches of mind, heart, and worldly wealth. If we wish to taste their most delicate and refined sweetness, let us give them to Jesus, and the touch of his hand as he accepts them and gives them back to us will leave a lingering fragrance that nothing else can impart. Was not the water from the well of Bethlehem sweeter to David as he poured it out unto the Lord than if he had greedily gulped it down? I just like that. He had some neat thoughts. Any other thoughts before we go to verse 18? And Abishai, the brother of Joab, the son of Zeruiah. Zeruiah was, I believe, David's sister. And so Abishai, Joab, and Asahel were all David's nephews. And I found that Abishai is actually the oldest. I don't know how I didn't have time to look at that up, see where they thought that, but that's what they said. He's the oldest. I always thought Joab was the oldest. Abishai, the brother of Joab, the son of Zeruiah, was chief among three. Now, here's another three. We don't really know which three this is. It's conjectured it would be the three top men of the 30 of his listed mighty men. And he lifted up his spear against 300 and slew them, and had a name among three. Was he not the most honorable of three? Therefore he was their captain. Howbeit he attained not to the first three. You guys figure it out, and then you can tell me.
We're not going to have a test, are we?
But anyway, I would love to do a little bit more of a study on Abishai. He's kind of a interesting person. He reminds me actually of Peter in the New Testament. He was very impetuous. We read about him from the very first time that David's in the king of the court of Saul, and as he comes out and goes in, and then there's Joab, and then there's Asahel, but we know more about Abishai than most of the other men that are listed. But I think that his being the brother of Joab kind of did not work for him, because I don't think Joab was a very good guy. He did what he wanted. He did not have a heart after the Lord. That's pretty clear. And it didn't really matter what David wanted, because sometimes he obeyed him if it pleased him, and sometimes he didn't if it didn't please him. But Abishai seems to be a little bit more willing to do what David wanted. Maybe he cared for David a little bit more. He had a different relationship with David than Joab did. But he was Joab's brother, and you can see that. He helped Joab kill Abner. And David felt real bad about that. He was impetuous. Remember, he was the one who said, when he went with David, that was commendable, to the camp of Saul when Saul was after him. Abishai and David are the ones that went down, and David said, "Who will go with me?" Abishai said, "I will." So then when they had a chance to kill Saul, it was Abishai that said, "David, here we go. I'll just hit him once and he'll be gone." And David said, "No, we're not going to do that." But he didn't. I think had it been Joab, he might have gone ahead and done it. That was the difference between the two. Abishai did listen to David more. And then when Shimei cursed David, when David was fleeing because of Absalom, it was Abishai that said, let me kill him. I think had it been Joab, he might have just done it without even asking David. But David said, no, we're not going to kill Shimei. And twice he did that, on their way out and on their way back in. On the way back in, Shimei was very careful and sorry that he had cursed David, because he knew that he could have been killed. And again, David had mercy on him, but Shimei wanted to kill him. So he also saved David's life at least once. And so it's conjectured he must have died before David did, because when Adonijah, the first chapter or two of Kings that we read about, Adonijah, David's son, he was the next in line to be king because of age. But David didn't want Adonijah. He had told everyone before that he wanted Solomon. But Adonijah was just not going to listen to that. And so when David was on his deathbed, Adonijah set himself up. And Joab takes Adonijah's side, even though Joab probably knew that David wanted Solomon. And Joab, it didn't matter to him. God's choice was Solomon, and it didn't matter to Joab. But Abishai is not mentioned at all. And I think he would have been mentioned. He would have made a choice, and he would have been mentioned if he had been alive. So, any thoughts on him before we go to the next guy? All right, verse 20. And Benaniah, the son of Jehoiada, a priest, the son of a valiant man of Kabzeel, who had done many acts, he slew 2 lion-like men of Moab. I don't know why it's lion-like, maybe their valor and strength. He went down also and slew a lion in the midst of a pit in time of snow. And he slew an Egyptian, a goodly man, and the Egyptian had a spear in his hand. But he went down to him with a staff, and he plucked the spear out of the Egyptian's hand and slew him with his own spear. These things did Benaniah, son of Jehoiada, and had the name among the 3 mighty men. He was more honorable than the 30, but he attained not to the first 3. In my mind, it seems like there's 3, the highest 3. And then there's another 3 that was part of the 30, but not part of the first 3. I could be totally wrong.
But who really was at the top of the lot?
The first 3 we read, I think. And
Okay.
see, I don't even think Abishai was there, and this guy wasn't. So it tells you, I mean, if that's the case, those first 3 men were pretty great warriors. Let me see. And David set him over his guard. I was a little surprised to realize that there's quite a bit said about this man, Benaniah, or Benaiah is probably how you say that. 1 Chronicles 27:5, the 3rd army commander assigned the 3rd month was Benaiah, son of Jehoiada the priest. He was the leader of his division, which consisted of 24,000 troops. And then another place in 2 Samuel 20:23, now Joab was the general in command of all the army of Israel. Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was over the Kerethites and the Perethites. And it's pretty clear that these 2 groups were the bodyguards of David, and maybe who else. And then in 2 Samuel 20:23, oh wait, I read that. Yes, and then I would like to read actually in 1 Kings chapter 2, if someone will get this for me, verses 23 through 35. 23 through 35, chapter 2 of 1 Kings, 23 through 35. Leanne, would you mind reading that for us?
If you tell me again, 1 Kings 20,
Chapter 2,
chapter 2.
yes, verse 23 through 35.
Okay. 22,
23.
23. And they told the king, saying, Behold, Nathan the prophet, and when he was come in before the king, bowed himself before the king with his face to the ground.
And this is King Solomon.
And Nathan said, My lord, O king, hast thou said, Adonijah shall reign after me, and he shall sit upon my throne?
Maybe it's David. Go ahead.
That's not what mine said. That's not what mine said either. First Kings 2,
Uh-huh.
23.
That's not what I have.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I just have Samuel in my book, so that's.
So what?
What do you have? 1 Kings?
1 Kings?
2.
Oh, God love you. No, I'm in 1.
Okay.
That's not what mine says.
Okay.
You have to stay on top of me. Okay. 23?
Yeah.
Okay. Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, saying, God, do so to me, and more also, if Adonijah has not spoken this word against his own life. That's when he asked for the Shulamite.
Mm-hmm.
Now therefore, as the Lord liveth, who hath established me and set me on the throne of David my father, and who hath made me an house, as he promised, Adonijah shall be put to death this day. And King Solomon sent by the hand of Benaiah, the son of the other man, yes, and he fell upon him that he died.
And keep reading till 35.
To 35? Oh. And unto Abiathar the priest said the king, Get thee to Anathoth unto thine own field, for thou art worthy of death. But I will not at this time put thee to death, because thou didst bear the ark of the Lord God before David my father, because thou hast been afflicted in all in which my father was afflicted. So Solomon thrust out Abiathar from being priest unto the Lord, that he might fulfill the word of the Lord which he spoke concerning the house of Eli in Shiloh. Then tidings came to Joab, for Joab had turned after Adonijah, though he turned not after Absalom. And Joab fled into the tabernacle of the Lord and caught hold of the horns of the altar. And it was told King Solomon that Joab was fled unto the tabernacle of the Lord, and behold, he is by the altar. Then Solomon sent Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, that fellow, saying, Go, fall upon him. And Benaiah came to the tabernacle of the Lord and said unto him, Thus saith the king, Come forth. And he said, No, but I will die here. And Benaiah brought the king's word again, saying, Thus said Joab, and thus he answered me. And the king said unto him, Do as he hath said, and fall upon him, and bury him, that thou mayest take away the innocent blood which Joab shed from me and from the house of my father. And the Lord shall return his blood upon his own head, who fell upon 2 men more righteous and better than he, and slew them with the sword of my father David, not knowing of it. Abner the son of Ner, captain of the host of Israel, and Amasa the son of Jether, captain of the host of Judah. Their blood shall therefore return upon the head of Joab, and upon the head of his seed forever. But upon David, and upon his seed, and upon his house, and upon his throne, shall there be peace forever from the Lord. So Benaiah the son of went up and fell upon him and slew him, and he was buried in his own house in the wilderness. And the king put Benaiah the son in the stead over the host, and Zadok the priest did the king put in the stead of Abiathar.
Okay. So we see that Benaiah was very instrumental in Solomon's setting up his kingdom. And he actually took Joab's place then. But for him to be willing to obey Solomon and what Solomon was saying, um, and I think that he realized he was obeying God too, because these men were ungodly, and Solomon would have shown them mercy had they just done what he asked, and they didn't. And so, but I just wanted to bring out that Benaiah was the main character here that performed those things. So that was interesting. I did not know that about Benaiah. So go back then to our chapter 23, verse 24 now. Asahel, the brother of Joab, was one of the 30. Now we know that he's dead. Abner had killed him. Remember, he ran after Abner and wouldn't stop. And Abner did actually try to save his life, but he wouldn't. And so Abner killed him, which was why Joab and Abishai, getting them all mixed up, they killed Abner because of this. But Asahel, the brother of Joab, was one of the 30. So it tells you that not only was he a very fast runner, I kind of had an impression of him that he was maybe younger and not very smart, but he was a mighty warrior. So Elhanan, the son of Dodo of Bethlehem, Shema the Harodite. Now, I'm not going to read all the names because they don't mean a whole lot to us. These are just now a list. Through verse 34, we have a list of the rest of the 30 of David's mighty men. Now, one thing, let me see. Oh, verse 34. Eliphalet, the son of Abishai, the son of the Maachathite, Eliam, the son of Ahithophel, the Gilonite. Now, does anybody remember who Ahithophel was?
But, go ahead. Bathsheba's
Grandfather. And David's what?
grandfather-in-law. Oh, David's,
No, what was
nothing like
Ahithophel?
thinking in the natural.
What was Ahithophel to David?
An advisor.
He was a counselor, yes,
Counselor.
advisor, and very good one. And I think they were close at one time. It's even conjectured that Ahithophel might have been in the army and a mighty warrior himself. We don't know that for sure. But his son is Eliam, the son of Ahithophel the Gilonite. And that's how we know it was the same Ahithophel, because that Gilead, I think, is where it was from. Anyway, Gilonite, maybe it was a different town, but that's the same person. And so,
I have one more underlined in here, and I'm not sure the connection. Ittai, is that the one, did he go when David left, had to
Yes.
leave the city, and
I think
this
he is
man
the same one.
provided for them and that kind of thing?
Oh, wait a minute. Ittai. Now here it says children of Benjamin. Ittai, that one was a Hittite, which is different. Some of them have the same name. Just like, okay, and then verse 35 names some more. Verse 37 says Zelek the Ammonite. Well, the Ammonites, we know who they were. David fought them and was victorious over them. A foreigner is what this man was. And then Igal of Zobah and Ittai the Gittite. Maybe that's what I was thinking. Anyway, Uriah the Hittite. So Uriah was even a foreigner, but they were proselytes. They were incorporated into Israel because they came in and wanted to believe in was willing to bow down to Israel's God and be a part of the Israelites. And so some of these men came and they began to be with David back when he was running from Saul, like in Ziklag. Some of these people were foreigners that came, and yet they proved very faithful to David. Like the Ittai that we're thinking of, Leanne, he was faithful to David. And so, there's a couple of thoughts I have. One, with the foreigners, God is not exclusive. And I'm glad he's not, because I'm not an Israelite, I'm not a Jew. He offers the same things to us, the foreigners, as he does Israel. We can be a part just as close. I mean, these were some of David's closest friends had been foreigners.
And that's really neat that he accepted.
Yes, it's nice that David did too, because he didn't have to, and some kings didn't. Yeah, he was Jewish, but David is a type of Jesus, and we know that Jesus he
No
loved
respecter
everyone.
of person.
Right.
Well, too, God gave commandments in so many words to Israel about the strangers
Yes,
and the foreigners,
and
and
yes.
don't forget where you came from.
Right,
And so
right.
even then, he left the door open, I think, for
Yes.
them to.
I think so too. And then the last thought too about this list of mighty men, sometimes we wonder, well, okay, what's the important thing here about all these people? That, number one, their names are in the Bible. And number two, David did not do all his exploits by himself. He had a group of people with him. I think God intends us to go down this journey of running to win Christ with others. We are all together, and we help one another. Some of these men saved David's life more than once. And David knew that he could not go out and fight by himself. He had an army with him. And I appreciate that. And David's mighty men, now I've forgotten how many times they're listed, at least 2, maybe 3 times. The mighty men of David are listed, all these names. And I appreciate that. Any other thoughts? Yes, God wanted them their names are in Scripture, and that's a blessing and honor. Now, we have a little bit of time. Let's go ahead and go into 2 Samuel 24. Chapter 24. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. And he moved David against them to say, go number Israel and Judah. Now, the parallel passage in 1 Chronicles 21:1, it's the same thing. It says, Satan stood up against Israel and provoked David to number Israel. So just taking those two verses together, what it seems here is that Israel had committed some offense. It reminds me of when God brought his wrath against Israel because of Saul's killing of the Gibeonites, remember? To me, it's the same thing, only we just don't know what the reason was. It just says that God's wrath. But, God doesn't bring his wrath for no reason. So there was something that had happened that we are just not told. And when it says he moved David against them, the word he, I think, is referring to Satan.
Yeah, so it says in my Bible.
Yes, God doesn't move people to sin, but God didn't stop David. So it causes me to realize that we don't ever reach a place. David was such a man of God. He had such love in his heart. He was such a great man. But, he was human. And so this is an instance where he showed us his humanity.
So you're saying here where it says, and he incited, or I don't know what the King James is. The he there is Satan.
Yeah.
And it says it exactly that way.
In Chronicles. Yeah. In 1 Chronicles 21, it says
And
that.
Satan stood up.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, 2 Samuel 24:2. So the king said to Joab, the commander of the army, who was with him, and also we don't know exactly when this happened. It probably was towards the end of David's reign. I was thinking about Satan causing him to do this. But other than that, we don't know. So David said to Joab, go through all the tribes of Israel from Dan to Beersheba and number the people, that I may know the number of the people. It's conjectured that this must have been, David must have wanted to know their number because he needed to know the military might of Israel. And we're not sure, but there's other places in Scripture that that Israel is numbered, and it was God's will to number them. So why it was not God's will at this time, we don't know for sure. But I just think it could have been a military thing. And as such, David wasn't believing God like he should have, because God didn't need a certain amount of warriors in order to give Israel victory. We could see through those mighty men. He only needed one sometimes. And so, let me see. For once, Joab was right. He said, David, we shouldn't do this. This is not a good thing. But the king's word, verse 4, prevailed against Joab and the commanders of the army. So evidently Joab and the commanders of the army all said, David, don't do this. So the fact that David insisted, to me, is the problem here. Because God gives us people around us to help us and to warn us. We need to listen. That doesn't mean we do everything everybody around us says. But God puts a family of God together. And what people say to us is something that we should really pray about, give heed to. And David, had he done that, had he been willing to do that at this time, he would saved 70,000 deaths, is what he would save.
And those people around us don't always have to be just doing things so.
Right, because Joab
did not, but a couple of times, I think God used Joab with all his other things to point David in the right direction.
Right.
When they won that battle, and David was mourning over
with
his
Absalom,
son.
when Joab said, bring him back, David. Yeah. And Joab was right in those cases.
Do you think it could be pride?
Oh, yes, I do. I think pride affects every single human that ever was born. I think that's one of our worst and most dangerous enemies. And we are born with pride. And so we have to, and for David, for a man that's set up in a place of leadership, I think it's easier for him to be proud.
The flesh operates in pride.
Yes,
There's no
it does.
way.
Right, it does. So the king's word prevailed, and it wasn't just Joab, it was the commanders of the army too. So Joab and the commanders of the army went out from the presence of the king to number the children of Israel, or people of Israel. They crossed the Jordan and began from Aror, I don't know how to say that, and from the city that is in the middle of the valley toward Gad and on to Jazer. Then they came to Gilead, and I'm gonna give you the. I couldn't find maps just that showed me exactly that showed a pathway or that of this census that David did, but there's a map here that shows you kind of the land that David had, all of the land of Israel at that time. Okay, go ahead and pass these out. We know that.
And that big one from Mary Ann.
Sure, I think I know. We know that David and Solomon both had about the same area, and you can see all the area that's shaded in was David's reign. And just compare that for a minute to what Israel is today. Oh, I'll make some more.
Here,
She'll
take
get
this.
more, she'll get more.
Okay, but this was going to be from Mary Ann, so at least.
Well, we can look at it right now and we'll give it back to you.
No.
Okay.
How many more do I need? 2? Okay. So, and I circled kind of the places that I could find that it says that they went as far as the census. So I don't know if you can see. It's just right around here in the very middle of this. Yeah. That was the area that they went and numbered. And I was thinking, maybe Joab didn't want to go because it took 9 months and 20 days. It took a long time, and he had to be busy doing something. Maybe he just was an older man and tired by this time, didn't want to do all that. But anyway, I wanted you to have the map just because it also shows us the territory that David had. And this wasn't all just Jewish. It was territory that he was in dominion over, that he held the dominance over. So, verse 8. When they'd gone through all the land, they came to Jerusalem at the end of 9 months and 20 days. So, David it doesn't say anything that he was thinking or anything that he did during this 9 months. And Joab gave the sum of the numbering to the people to the king. In Israel there were 800,000 valiant men who drew the sword, and the men of Judah were 500,000. So there was 1,300,000. But it says valiant men who drew the sword. So that's why we think it was probably related to a military matter, because he didn't number everyone. He just numbered the men able to fight. In 1 Chronicles 27, 23 through 24, David took not the number of them from 20 years old and under, because the Lord had said he would increase Israel like to the stars of the heavens. Joab, the son of Zeruiah, began to number, but he finished not, because there fell wrath for it against Israel. Neither was the number put in the account of the Chronicles of King David. And this is in 1 Chronicles 27, 23, and 24. So, and I was wanting to make sure that this was the same incident, but it was. And so evidently they didn't number everyone because what we're going to read next about God judging Israel and bringing a plague on them already started. So Joab stopped numbering. But notice the first part of verse 23 says in 1 Chronicles, because the Lord had said he would increase Israel like to the stars of the heavens. Now, I don't know if God reiterated that promise to David, or if David simply realized, like all Israelites would realize, that God had given this promise to Abraham. And I think they carried those, by word of mouth, they carried the promises of God down to the next generation and the next. In Genesis 15, 4 and 5. Now the word of the Lord came to Abraham, this one will not be your heir. Instead, the one who comes from your own body will be your heir. And he took him outside and said, look at the sky and count the stars if you're able to count them. Then he said to him, your offspring will be that numerous. So that was a part of God's covenant with Abraham. And I'm just about 100% sure that David would know that. And so that's why it referred to the Lord saying he would increase Israel like the stars of the heavens. So if David was worried that Israel didn't have enough fighting men, he should realize that God had given him victory all the time. And he did realize that most of the time. I don't know why he didn't now.
I think it makes sense what you say about David should have known this, because that's how we have the scriptures. You see, God holds us responsible for this. And you can see in some of these instances that God held Israel responsible way down here for things he told them way back here.
That's true.
And so it had to go through the family. And the times it says that you tell your children and your grandchildren, because
true.
it was the only way they were going to know it.
Yes. And then their actions would please
Yes.
God rather than not please him. Yes. Now, the next verse, verse 10, I really like. And David's heart smote him. After that, he had numbered the people. And if we realize before, when David committed the sin with Bathsheba, it was a year that before God sent Nathan the prophet to him. And so he had a year to repent. He had a year to say, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But Nathan came, and at least to David, in David's defense, as soon as Nathan told him, you are the man, David repented. And that's admirable. Here, I think it's admirable that no prophet had to come to him. He just realized it. And so I don't know if it took him 9 months, maybe, to realize it, because that's how long it took to number the people. But David said to the Lord, I have sinned greatly in that I have done. And now I beseech thee, O Lord, take away the iniquity of thy servant, for I've done very foolishly. So David had a heart that would respond to God's promptings. And that's what we need. For when David was up in the morning, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Gad, David's seer, saying, Go say to David, thus saith the Lord, I offer thee three things. So this is after David repented. So God came to him. So there had to be, remember David, they still lived under the law. There had to be a punishment for this. And so God said, I offer thee three things. Choose thee one of them, that I may do it unto thee. So Gad came to David and told him and said unto him, Shall 7 years of famine come to thee in thy land? And in 1 Chronicles 21:12, this is the parallel passage. It reads 3 years, not 7. And it makes more sense just to me because the other two choices was 3 months and then 3 days. So 3 years kind of makes sense. We don't know for sure which one is right. 1 Chronicles 21:12. So it makes more sense to me that he would say 3 years. So he could have 3 years of famine, or wilt thou flee 3 months before thine enemies, or run from all of his enemies for 3 months, or that there might be 3 days pestilence in the land, 3 days of something. Now advise and see what answer I shall return to him that sent me. So Gad is saying, David, tell me what you pick, and I'll tell God.
Isn't that funny? 'Cause
Yeah.
God was going to know anyway.
Yeah, he was. And David said to Gad, I am in a great strait. Can you imagine how bad David felt? Now people are going to die because of him. Let us fall now into the hand of the Lord, for his mercies are great, and let me not fall into the hand of man. And I think that was a wise choice, because he knew God well enough to know that God was merciful. And 3 days seemed to be maybe a little bit better. That would get it all over with. And so the next verse, 15. So the Lord sent a pestilence upon Israel from morning even to the time appointed. And there died of the people from Dan even to Beersheba 70,000 men. That's a lot.
Wow.
70,000. We
On
don't
your
know what the
account?
pestilence was, but 70,000. And it says men. I don't know if it was just men or the women and children too, but it just says men. And I was just thinking about this 70,000. In comparison, the attacks on 9/11 took the lives of 2,996 people. And that was terrible for the whole country. We all, and that it was only 2,000, not 70. And then I thought too, Safford has a population of 10,541 people as of 2023. That kind of, to me, helps me understand a little bit more. 70,000. So that's a lot. And I'm going to stop there because if you'd like to go ahead and read this week, the rest of it, I have questions for you, but they're only on the last part of chapter 23. And I think, let me see what I did.
I have a question. I'm just noticing in this chapter, in chapter 4, 3. You get 3 years of famine, 3 years of, 3 is a significant number.
Yes, the only thing I can think of is the Trinity is 3.
Also, a threefold cord is not easily broken.
Yes, a threefold cord is not easily broken. That's 3 is a very. Mom, do you have any ideas more about the number 3? I know usually it depicts God because it's the Trinity.
Yeah. And then the 3, the top 3, warrior, the top
Yes,
3.
yes.
Top 3, that one goes 3, the other top 3.
Yeah.
That's how much. I'm
Easier to count. 3, 3, 3. 10 threes.
Oh, here, give that to. Very nice.
I'll make some more copies.
You want me to turn it on?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and you think about, we always talk about what Paul had to get past because he had some people in the church